I was already doing marketing without actually realizing it, and the opportunity just presented itself. They don't fully realize that the product that they are designing is actually supposed to be sold at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the position is dual-faced. One is you look inside the company, and then you represent the company out.
Yeah.
From my experience, customers very often ask for something which isn't possible.
You are connected to the Evolving Digital Podcast.
Hi, I'm Adam Butler, and this is Evolving Digital. We're here to pull back the curtains and share the secrets of digital giants and disruptors. We'll be bringing you high-quality, in-depth interviews, and all we ask of you is that you hit that subscribe button so we can keep doing this. Now let's jump into it.
I'm here with Stein Nesbakk, application engineer by trade, turned marketing engineer by profession. Recently, Stein was part of a team that radically changed the way engineers create their designs and application. So, welcome, Stein.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell me a little bit about your career? You've been working as a marketeer, but also as an application engineer. So how did that all get started? How did you turn to the dark side?
Well, it's a bit of a complex story. So I studied electrical and electronic engineering in university, and then I did my internship at my current company where I work, which is Nexperia, and I did my internship as an application engineer, and then I finished my degree. I started as an application engineer. Application engineering revolves around hardware. So you do lots of hardware design, you validate designs, and we're validating devices in this case. Yeah. So we work in the semiconductor industry. You validate that the device is operating as it should. And my problem largely revolved around the iteration speed. So I quite like iterating. That's how I work. Mm-hmm. However, within the hardware sphere, iterations can take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So if you do a singular mistake, oftentimes you can try to patch it up quickly, but oftentimes it needs a new redesign. And then when you have that new redesign, it's a 2-3 week process, and I found that quite a drag.
So it's not just changing a schematic, you also have to change the hardware too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
so
right.
It means first is debugging the thing, right? So understanding why is it not doing what you want it to do. Then there is the schematic thing. Then there's the layout. You have to change the layout. Then you have to send off the files, get it manufactured, get it back. Sometimes you can even get the wrong manufacturing spec back. And then you have to resend it again so you get the right one. You have to build up the board, and then you have to revalidate, essentially. Yeah. So it quite quickly becomes iterative. And for the way I work and the way I think, I found that quite repetitive relatively quickly. Right. And within Nexperia, there was a reorganization happening, and essentially there was an opportunity that showed up for technical marketing. And I was already doing marketing without actually realizing it, and the opportunity just presented itself. And I was hesitating for a long time because I was quite nervous of losing my technical side. Yeah. And I was going to become just full-on marketing. And I remember my future boss-to-be even told me, I promise you're not going to be playing with crayons. You are going to be doing proper work. You are most likely going to still have quite a lot of technical exposure. Yeah. And I took the plunge, essentially.
And when you say I was doing marketing, but without actually knowing I was doing that, what were you doing?
Well, so for example, so as an application engineer, we also do product promotion. Yeah. And that means writing papers. That means even YouTube videos. Yeah, so I had some YouTube videos already as an application engineer. And also simply doing more promotion activity, talking to customers and so on and so forth. Right. And I noticed I was doing more and more of that and less of the hardware side. And I was also leaning more and more towards software, because unlike with hardware, if you do a mistake in software, you do Control Z, and then you can just restart, essentially. So the iteration speed, it was coming back. And that's basically, I ended up in marketing, and I had the offer that I could always turn back to application engineering after 3 months.
Yeah, you had the safety net there.
Yeah, I had the safety net, so just in case, but I haven't turned back. So I think now 3 years in the position, and I'm loving every moment of it. Yeah. And in terms of my fear of not doing more technical stuff. I'm now doing even more technical stuff than I intended to do.
How
in
does
the
that
first
work?
place.
Because you're working with clients, or you're with the development and
So it's a lot of indirect stuff. So if you look at an organization, especially within the semiconductor industry is notorious for being siloed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a reason for this. 20 years back,
Sure.
it was kind of like business reasons to silo departments in terms of protecting the industry in terms of downturns. However, somebody has to collect a common business view at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's what marketing does. Now, because you have that heritage of kind of blocked off way of working, that means you have to walk over to people and you have to talk to them. And that often means they don't fully realize that the product that they are designing is actually supposed to be sold at the end of the day. You know, it's nearly a surprising thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it is, okay, explain to me what you're doing, explain to me why you're doing it, and I'll try to translate it into something which could, make sense for a customer.
Yeah.
So the position is dual-faced. One is you look inside the company, and then you represent the company out.
Yeah.
But then you look the other way, you look at the customer, and then you represent the customer's interest
Exactly.
internally.
So that was my next question. So it also works the other way around, right? So as a marketer, you need to listen to your audience, you need to listen to your clients, and do you bring that back to the engineer that actually is working on the application?
Yes, so I'm very cautious about this.
Yeah.
So from my experience, customers very often ask for something which isn't possible. And especially within the B2B environment, right? So we sell essentially a commodity product.
Yeah.
When you sell a commodity product, price is king.
Yeah.
So you can ignore lots of the marketing fluff and they're just going to say, well, I want a cheaper thing. I don't care about anything else. And that's very rarely true that they don't care about anything else. And I had that discussion with a big customer and I said, sure, we can give you a very cheap product, but if we don't give you the data sheet, you're not going to buy the product, right?
True.
And they kind of were like, okay, cool. So I was like, and you kind of have to start pulling information out that, okay, leave pricing aside. What would make your life easier? I understand we have a commodity product. I understand it's similar to other products from other competitors potentially, but what would make your life easier to use a commodity product, right? So that's why I'm very cautious in terms of just directly listening to a customer. You kind of have to really try to understand the problem and what they see, not what they say.
So I grew up in semiconductors. My dad worked for TI.
Yeah.
I moved to the US because my dad worked for TI.
Yeah.
I always experienced it as a very innovative market and industry, but on the innovation on the client side or maybe in the marketing side, it's always and sales as well, a very traditional type of approach on how to sell. Also the innovative and new products, but also the commodity products. Is there as a technical marketeer, is there something that you have seen changed over the past few, maybe the decade?
Well, so I can give a very simple example of this. So, for example, we had the internet, which was created back in the 90s, around that time,
Good
right?
thing, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a nice invention. Now, what did the semiconductor industry do, right?
Yeah.
We took the paper data sheets and we put them into a PDF.
Yes.
That's
Very
what-
digital.
That's where the innovation stopped,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of, and I agree. So in terms of the product itself, the semiconductor product, the innovation has been absolutely insane.
Yeah.
What we're seeing today with the GPUs, the Intel chips, the AMD chips, all of them, it's impressive. It's quite amazing. Yeah. However, when we look at how the products are described, how people work with the products, that hasn't changed. Even the models. So models are a big thing where you kind of can represent and mathematically represent the product, the semiconductor product. Now, that mathematical representation was actually initially designed back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
The only thing that's really changed is maybe our precision and our capability, but nothing outside of that has really changed in terms of the real, true marketing capability in that sense. So it is slowly coming around. However, I believe there is a big resistance around. It's a B2B environment. It has semiconductors sounds new, but actually it's been around for quite a long time already. So you have like 50 years of heritage, essentially, of the way to do things, the way to do sales, the way to do marketing. And there's a customer expectation as well. So everybody's used to something, and then just switching it over, for example, from a data sheet over to something else, is all of a sudden quite difficult, right?
And because why is that? Because I mean, if you make the comparison to how B2C is driving, and the business-to-consumer market is driving their marketing efforts, it's usually customer-driven. Customer wants something, or there's a need. We will change the way how we bring things to market, or we package it differently, or we have, different customer service. Is that also something that you see happening in B2B, or is it?
So, yes and no. So again, because of the commoditization of things, it is quite difficult. So, where a customer, you can change the perception of a product, you can change the perceived value of a product.
Yeah.
Which often means if you as a company in a B2C environment, you're up against potentially one person, maybe a couple of family members, depending on how much money they're about to put something in. In a B2B environment, you're up against a chain of command and a group of people making a decision about your product.
Yeah.
So let's say you sell a singular product, you're not selling it to one person, you're selling it most likely to 5 people, and most likely none of those 5 people will actually use the product at the end of the day. Right? It's the engineer far in the background who's going to end up using it.
Yeah.
And getting to that engineer is, I believe, the absolute paramount importance is how do you get to the person who's actually going to use it? Not the purchasing manager, not the management, not the directors, how to get to the person who's actually making the decision, because at the end of the day, they're the only person who can say yes.
Yeah.
Right?
No matter what, they have to build the application.
They have to say yes, right? So they can also say, no, I can't work like this.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to get to. And that's where I believe a lot of work remains to be done, and kind of like punching through all the way through all the noise, essentially through all the layers.
And is the idea on how to reach those engineers, has digital been a driving force behind that to do that differently? Or is it a different process that the engineer goes through to find information? How's that making, what are companies doing to make that, doing business more easy?
Yeah, so if you look a bit on a historical use case, so I was told by senior colleagues that back in the day they used to each have an assistant of some sort, or they used to share an assistant essentially. So the assistant would manage all the data sheets, they get all the part books, get all the salespeople in, and they would do the product promotions essentially, and it would be very person to person. Now we're shifting over to a point where the engineers themselves are going out to look for a solution.
Right.
So the solution isn't coming to them. You have to go out and look, and then you have to make yourself visible, right?
Yeah, as the provider.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then the question kind of becomes, okay, so how do you make yourself more visible? And that's where we see forums popping up, right? So we have major manufacturers; they're now creating their own forums.
Yeah.
To try to create this ecosystem,
like the traditional message boards type of.
Exactly right.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're trying to kind of create this environment where people who want to themselves seek out information have an area to go. YouTube, for example, is a good example.
Yeah.
Influencers, even within engineering, there's quite a few influencers. I've even seen reviews of our products.
Yeah.
Which is quite wild to think about, that somebody's actually reviewing our products.
I know that didn't happen 10 years ago.
Exactly right.
No.
So,
wow.
But it's happening because at the end of the day, B2B is starting to look more and more like B2C.
Yeah.
Because we're driving over to people making the decisions at the end of the day. It's not like this big system. It's that there's now the potential for that one person who can say yes far back to step forward
and actually make the difference in the purchasing decisions.
And actually be like, this is what we need.
Yeah.
This is what's going to work.
Right.
This is going to change our product for the better.
So don't want to linger too much in how it used to be, but the sales getting onto an airplane and flying to key accounts and doing their sales magic. Basically, that is changing as well. Then, right? I mean, there is those engineers that are behind their workbench, creating their designs. They have tools and they have insights and they have information at their fingertips, right? On a laptop or tooling.
Yeah. So we're seeing kind of a shift essentially. So where, for example, the sales essentially sales would be the ones doing the entire, essentially AIDA. So if you look at the AIDA model, they would do the entire AIDA model.
Yeah.
Actually now, when you look at things, sales is kind of getting narrower and narrower because the AIDA model is supposedly being covered by digital tools.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So there is clearly that shift happening slowly.
Is talking about tools. You've been part of a team that is, like I said in the introduction, created an application that made it easier for the engineer, or at least cut their development time or design time down. Well, I'm not going to say half, but at least it's going to a major impact on the time they needed to spend on getting a design finished. That was a digital application, right? It was something that that was going from a traditional way of working to a digital way of working.
Yep.
How did that happen? How was it somebody got this idea of this can be done smarter or faster, or was it a need from the market?
Well, so nobody asked for this.
That's good.
Yeah, so that's a good start, right? So nobody asked for it, which is also indicating of the maturity of things.
Yeah.
And in terms of just directly trusting a customer's feedback. Now, this actually came from when I was an intern. And as intern tasks go, I had to do some fun jobs of calculating datasheet values.
Yeah.
So I'd created an Excel, you get the data out of the datasheet, you do the calculations, you do them again and again and again and again. And I think I did like 50 of them.
Yeah.
Each one of the calculations takes, depending on how well the setup was, I'd say 15 minutes.
15? 15,
15.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's depending, and that was me knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. A customer who doesn't know what they're doing, that can take considerably longer.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know what? I just want a slider. I just want to I just want to change the condition.
The parameter, the parameters. You want to change the parameters.
I just want to change the conditions to something, and then I just want to see the parameter. I don't want to do this math. There's no value in it essentially.
But you were actually calculating by hand.
Yeah. So
or in Excel, but
sometimes by hand, sometimes on Excel, depending on how much work you have to do. Right.
Right.
And that's how many of our customers.
And this was 20 years ago? No, it was.
No. That was sadly 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
And actually, we even did it before this tool came out.
Yeah.
We were still doing it.
Yeah.
And the problem with this is it's quite resource intensive, but the critical problem is it expects you to know what you're doing ahead of time.
Yeah.
So if you do not know MOSFETs, for example, so we do MOSFETs, if you don't know MOSFETs on an intimate level, how they operate and what conditions impact what, you're in the dark, right?
Yeah.
And then what do you do? Well, then you go to sales. And then sales go back to the field application engineer.
Yeah.
And the field application engineer goes back to the application engineer. The application engineer, which was me, does the calculation, gives it back to the field application engineer, which then gives it back to sales.
Okay, yeah.
And you have that loop that, well, fair enough, my time was 15-30 minutes to calculate it, but the actual loop for the customer that they see is 2 weeks.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And obviously, depending on how quickly we could do this, sometimes we could cut this down to a couple of days. But in a normal environment, right, that can take time to just get that feedback loop.
Yeah.
And that's just to tailor a data sheet, essentially, the capability to what the customer actually needs.
Yeah.
Right?
So the data was already there, but just how to unlock it from...
basically just how to do the math at the end of the day, right? So, and then, fair enough, you can spend time trying to train sales up on this, and you can try to explain it to them. But at the end of the day, if the sales then are doing the maths, then they're not selling, doing maths.
Right. Yeah.
So there's clearly just an inefficiency.
Yeah.
And so when I say nobody really asked for this feature, is because the customers, they were accustomed to this, they were expecting this, they were used to reaching out to the salesperson.
Nobody
about
saw
this.
it as a problem.
Yeah, it's this is how we do things, right?
Yeah.
So then with the interactive data sheets that we built,
Yeah.
basically you just drag a slider and it just changes. Everything's done on the fly. So instead of waiting a week for results, you actually get the results within a split of a second. And you can just drag the slider back and
So the client now doesn't have to call sales. They don't have to call their account manager or their field application
we
engineer.
don't even need to know who the client is. So a client who doesn't even have the capability of connecting to a salesperson, they can still resolve their own problem.
Right. Yeah.
And that was at the end of the day, that was the goal. We wanted them to be able to resolve the problem they have in an efficient way for them, and preferably efficient way for us as well.
Yeah. So now as a marketeer, you have created this tool that made life easier for everyone.
Yeah.
So the next step would be bringing that to your clients.
Yeah,
right?
so that was a fun one. Yeah.
How did you go about that? And was it just, hey guys, look at this awesome thing?
Well, so it's quite funny how that actually played out. So we did a good old marketing splash about this. We did all the LinkedIn posts, we did all the posts, and we saw some usage. The usage was going well. And I saw that it's not being used that much, which I find weird. So I asked one of the account managers, can I just join a customer call that you're going to have? I'm going to be very quiet. All I'm asking for is, can you just ask them about the interactive data sheet?
Yeah.
Point number one, they've never heard about interactive data sheets. Okay, fair enough. Show the interactive data sheet. The customer, in a direct sense, says that's not possible.
They didn't believe it.
Yeah, we were like, okay. So, and then I broke my promise and I started talking as in, what do you mean it's not possible? It's right in front of you. And the customer said no.
Can't be right.
Yeah, because if I was to simulate this, it would take me 2 minutes to run the simulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, but that's the point. We solved it. Right?
Yeah.
We've solved the problem. And they didn't believe it. So then I spent another hour explaining to them step by step the steps we go through. And then they started believing, actually, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then they started using it. But then the problem is, we can't go to every single customer and explain to them that this is in fact possible. And we've seen again and again that customers fundamentally do not believe. It's a toy. They view it as a toy rather than a actually data-driven tool.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't existed. And there was even another customer who said, this is so obvious that if this actually was legitimate, it would have been done 10 years ago.
Right. So that's a nice marketing kind of challenge to have, to get that adoption of this, kind of a new way of approaching calculations.
Well, both yes and no, because the point was to gain efficiency, but now we're actually spending time promoting the thing, right?
Yeah,
so we are now seeing adoption, so that's good. So we've kind of started hitting the mass where kind of we're hitting a usable adoption, and the secret was actually quite simple. You create a share button, so you can share the interactive data sheet at your conditions, which means they can then take the specific data sheet and they can just share it with the colleagues.
The way they configured the data sheet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they look at it and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was a tool. I didn't know that was a thing.
Wow. Okay.
And then you can kind of have a bit of a weak networking effect, but it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of slowly spreading.
Yeah.
And people start, there are a few believers that are, spreading the word.
And then also doing some YouTube videos explaining like Q&As, right? We collected quick questions and we just do some Q&As, starting to understand, okay, this is how it works. This is what we do in the background. This is the data you look at. This is why it's so fast, right? And yes, this is how we guarantee that it's correct, and yada yada yada.
So you're actually really doing it together with users to get that,
it's kind of convincing them at the end of the day. So as in, you try it. I understand it might seem a bit spooky that it works faster than you used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then after you've tried it, you can't easily step away.
Okay. That's an interesting development, I guess. When you have normally when there's something new and it will improve your life, people will jump on it, right? But now is it because of the engineering mindset, or is it because it has been done for so long in such a way that people are reluctant to hop on?
So I think it's all about gradual change. So imagine if you improve something by 20%.
Yeah.
Sounds plausible, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that makes complete sense that you've done a bit of an improvement. If you improve something by 10 times or 100 times, now all of a sudden you get into the adoption cycle, right? You need the early adopters, then you need to go through that you need to cross the chasm, right?
Yeah.
You have, all of a sudden, you've created a new thing and you have to go through the adoption cycle.
Yeah.
And that's where oftentimes doing something completely new is a risk.
But were you aware that was what was going to happen?
No.
It was just, you were
No, because initially we thought, hey, this is going to be easy, right?
Yeah.
We're going to create a wonderful tool. The regions loved it, so the sales guys loved it. They were already using it, so they were super happy about it. But we didn't realize that it was a trust. It was basically a trust issue.
Yeah.
There's no way, basically.
There's no way that something that obvious hasn't been invented before.
Yes, exactly. So.
That's I mean that's you don't hear that every day, right? That
it's a compliment, right?
I think it's a compliment, but it's also a challenge, right? If you're in such a kind of well, I'm not going to say traditional again, but I am. But that market that has been doing things for a long time in the same way, you throw in something new that is such kind of almost like a paradigm shift, right, on how you do your work.
Exactly.
You open up this whole can of marketing adoption issues that you haven't thought about when you start developing the tool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So that's exactly the situation we're at.
Yeah, and that's where we are right now, right? So that whole adoption cycle, and are you doing anything specific there to increase the speed of adoption, or?
Well, so we did some talks with the regions, right? And actually, that doesn't work as effective as one might think, because what's the goals of the sales guys in the regions? Their goal is to sell products, right? Not necessarily promote tools. So this is a benefit for the end customer and all the way back to headquarters essentially. But the regions don't necessarily, it's not within their interest to promote this tool. Because for them, they would just forward an email back in the day. They would just forward the email in that loop we discussed earlier. So for them, it's not that much of an efficiency change.
No.
And as well for sales, there is a difference between marketing and sales, which is sales, their goal is to close.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Their goal is not to necessarily raise awareness, which is a different thing.
Yeah.
So what we're now doing, instead of using our channels and assuming that everybody's listening on our channels, we're trying to go to other channels,
right?
Which is public forums, essentially. Yeah. So we're attempting to go where the customers already are.
Right, where the engineers are.
Yeah, and where we know they are discussing our products, and we just show the interactive data sheet there.
And engineers being critical, are they thinking about, there's, in this case, Nexperia, blowing their own horn?
You got to be careful with these things, right? So you can't just be like, look at these awesome things. Yeah. It's rather, you kind of just have to slide in the thing and be careful.
Okay, all right. So you talked a bit about regions. You talked a bit about sales. There's other departments involved in in development of marketing strategy, marketing tactics. What is your role as a technical or marketing engineer? Are you the glue that keeps it all together? Or are you just lobbying everywhere? How does that work? What do you need to do?
Management is going to love that question. That's their question they would love to ask. No, so the way I define it as running value add on top of the existing product,
right?
Basically, and very often, especially avoiding the product being undervalued in the first place,
right?
Especially within commoditized environments, that is a big risk.
Yeah,
right. So how do you ensure that you try to at least get the right value out of it, preferably even adding a bit more value in your step? Yeah. So where many say that, for example, marketing is a kind of an expense in a way.
Yeah, yeah. It's a cost center.
Essentially a cost center. Yeah. I view it as a direct profit center.
Yeah.
That's what it should be. That's what the aim should be.
Yeah.
Obviously, that means you have to change the way you think and how you approach things.
Yeah.
but it's fully possible to do.
So there's this, it's happening a lot, the servitizations, and so the added value on top of existing products and making, is that how you see this as well? It's making the life of the engineer easier and, getting a brand preference for your product.
Yes.
Is that kind of the line you're following?
Yes, it's at the end of the day, if you sell a complex product, you have to be very careful to not try to fall into the trap of explaining that it's a complex product.
Yeah.
Right? The goal should be to simplify.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just become a merchant of complexity.
Yes.
And especially nowadays, I see not just within semiconductors, not just within B2B, but there's a lot of merchants of complexity wandering around and selling, this tool is so complex and it's going to do everything for you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to think. Actually, what you're doing, you're just hiding away quite complicated things while not actually giving the answer in the first place. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which...
So that whole idea of this is a very complex thing and it is the answer to everything. We can't avoid the topic of AI, but that's like the holy grail thing right now, of course, right? And so is there any large language models being used for the application you're currently working on? Is there to make life easier? I mean, that's obviously the first step, easiest step, but
no. So it's being looked into.
Yep.
But it's not something we are actively pursuing right now. There are multiple reasons for this. Number one is, from my perspective, a large language model as the technology itself needs to stabilize a little bit.
Sure.
Because right now, you can run off and buy all the GPUs you need to run all the models you need. However, the clear value add is quite dangerous here. Because if you start attempting to calculate the profit here, how much do you spend to generate your answer, for example, versus actually the value it brings back in.
Right.
And that's quite dangerous. And especially now as we see models are getting more and more efficient, and they're still in kind of like the exponential area of getting more efficient, I believe just jumping in right now for a business and just committing to something is a dangerous place to be, because in 2 years it's going to look completely different.
Yeah.
And frankly, we need to go through an AI winter.
Through it?
AI winter.
Yeah.
So we need to go through an AI winter to see what sticks, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's the time to kind of make the decision.
And are you looking at other industries to see what will stick, and then trying to apply it to whatever you're working on? Or are you also experimenting yourself and seeing what sticks?
Yeah, so I quite like looking at the financial sector.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's lots of money involved, and it's quite aggressive competition.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at the hedge fund world, all the way down to the banking and investment banking. So if you look at the hedge fund world, they already had an AI race.
Yeah.
And that was back in the 80s.
Was it?
Yeah. So
explain yourself.
Yeah. So actually, artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. Actually, the term itself was coined in 1958 in Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Right. And in the 80s, I think it was first properly used by Jim Simmons, who created Renaissance Technologies, one of the highest performing hedge funds.
Yeah.
Which also coincidentally was one of the reasons for the crash in the 87, which was Black Monday. Now, with that, what happened with AI is all these companies started competing with each other. And what you started seeing is kind of these battlegrounds, if you will, appearing, where actually they're competing in different areas. So some are competing in, for example, high frequency trading.
Yeah.
Some are competing in medium trading, and some are competing in long-term trading. And I suspect within B2B environment, within marketing, maybe not right now, but we will see the exact same thing unfolding itself in maybe 10 years, where you'll see businesses committing to an approach.
Yeah.
Not 5, but 1, and doing it super well, which works for their business.
So looking historically, trying to recognize some patterns there. Yeah. That's how you apply that to, looking in the future.
Exactly.
And making a trying to make a smart decision there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, very rarely are we the first ones to experience something.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely.
Yeah.
Usually something similar has happened in history. So it's just finding something similar enough to our current situation. So everybody's now, the management's scrambling to do large language models
Of course.
and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not the first time this has happened.
No.
Right?
No.
So in terms of
it
the
was
technology
called
shift.
differently. They are different, but
Yeah,
it's
and even the advent of internet, right?
yeah.
That was also a massive paradigm shift back in the day,
It was.
which also resulted in 2000 crash afterwards.
Yeah.
But it was a paradigm shift, and then understanding how that paradigm shift, who survived that paradigm shift and who didn't,
Yeah.
can help you understand how to act right now. Essentially.
So, kind of takeaway here would be, just be mindful of the opportunities that are there. So the innovations that are going on, but be careful on how to when you jump in.
Yeah. So the way I view it is, as a marketeer, especially within technical marketing,
Yeah.
you have a whole host of different tools.
Yeah,
Don't use
tons.
Exactly. Don't use all the tools.
No.
Actually, just try to stick to 5% of them.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you know about 100% of the tools, well, to the best of your ability, but you only ever use 5%.
Yeah.
Because then at least you're committed to the 5% you do use.
But we're very prone to, see all the nice, shiny things and think,
Exactly.
oh, that's cool, let's try it. Nothing bad can happen from it, but, it will distract you from, everything that already works well. Right?
Exactly,
So-
yeah. So, and in terms of a prediction of mine, I suspect there might be a hint of that, is large language models, if we just look at them in isolation, they're changing how we think in the sense of they can actually show intent.
Yeah.
So where, for example, previously we use search engines, we use all that fancy maths and recommendation systems
Yeah.
to try to derive intent, actually now we're in a situation where the customers are willing to give up their intent in the first place.
Yeah.
They're willing to explain their intent.
Yeah.
That's valuable for both the customer and actually for the business.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So looking at the near future, but how do you envision that the relationship between technology and people will evolve? Is it people that will be people within organizations that need to drive that technology, or is technology changing the way people operate?
I think it's a little bit of both. So nothing stops technology.
No.
So
I agree.
technology is how we move forward,
Yeah.
essentially. So, and by technology moving forward, it must change how we think, but it will also change how we approach the topic in the first place. So we will see definitely some aggressive changes in the sense of utilization of technology. For example, now, if you saw somebody who went to the library to just get an answer to a question instead of using Google,
Yeah.
you'd probably wonder what they were doing.
Yeah.
Right? You'd question it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in management, you're going to question the efficiency of this. The same thing
Books? What?
Yeah, exactly. Like, who reads a book anymore?
Yeah.
But so you would suspect the same thing to happen with, for example, large language models in the future, where they would be able to give you an answer much faster. So I would imagine the efficiency is about to go up, which means mundane tasks will start falling away slowly, and the humans will become the more creative side. So you'll have to kind of piece together the creative angle.
Is trust holding that process back right now?
Absolutely.
Then engineers, but I think everybody should do it, but be very critical on what answers you get. I mean, when Wikipedia came up, a lot of us were like, okay, you need to be very careful what you read and validate that it's actually true, because everybody can, we don't know where the data is coming from. I mean, that's still the case. And now, is that so? You believe that is something that is kind of holding back the progress in that section?
Yeah, well, so we've all heard about large language model hallucinations.
Yeah.
And how that is essentially a deal breaker for quite a few businesses,
Yeah.
right? And then you have these solutions coming up, such as retrieval augmented generation. to try to resolve the hallucination problems and try to optimize the knowledge. And we start seeing kind of workarounds to the underlying problem that a model isn't perfect.
Created by humans, by the way.
Yeah. but the thing is, and I had that discussion as well, is but humans are also not perfect.
No.
So
but we accept that.
Yeah, we're willing to accept a human not being perfect, but we're not willing to accept a machine getting one thing wrong.
Right. And that's why we're reluctant on
so
embedding everything.
It's essentially an expectation, I'd say.
So another 10 years? 5 years?
Well, I don't give that sort of predictions. Nah. So
right. We have a couple of minutes left. If you've been doing this for close to 10 years, what would you give as an advice to the marketing professionals that are working in high tech and manufacturing industries on embracing digital or driving innovation? What would your main advice be to these people?
Avoid getting involved in all the tools. So everybody will sell you something in this area.
Yeah.
There's always, we can give you that data, we can give you that data. Don't forget what the goal is. The goal is to try to help the customer understand your product. You're trying to make them link to the product that you're promoting, essentially. Yeah. Don't forget that. It's very easy to get stuck in all the data, all the user statistics, the user journey, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And completely ignore the very basic approach of asking the customer.
Because asking the customer, it brings you back to what is actually required or needed. Because I love data, right? But I do not understand everything that I see that comes out of the data. So, but for some reason, everybody thinks that you should.
And the thing is, how do you draw a correct conclusion out of this, right? Because data has different definitions. You might have the right definition of the data, and you might have an incorrect definition or understanding of what the data represents, and then you can very quickly make a completely incorrect decision.
Yeah.
And the solution was simple: just ask.
Cool. Thanks. We have every guest we ask to ask a question for our next guest. We have one for you. Kind of goes back to what we kind of already discussed, but how would you detect opportunities within your organization, and how would you bring that to an operational level?
So there are two questions in there. So the
Probably
first
more, but yeah.
So the first one is, in a way, you have to listen to everything. So that means talk to your sales guys, understand their pain points, specifically understand what are the customers asking for again and again and again. You'll often realize it's not just cost, it's not just pricing.
No.
There's something else in there.
Yeah.
Number two is to actually talk to your engineering teams and actually understand what technically they're saying. That can often be difficult, but that means learning and understanding the technical side. Because oftentimes you'll see that in all the emails and all the packages and the promotion packages, you'll see critical details simply forgotten or lost from the entire chain of going through the entire thing. So I would suggest attempting to listen to everything in that sense.
And then when you have that opportunity crystal clear and you know what the client's saying, how do you, because let's take the example of your interactive data sheets application. How do you go through that internal adoption idea?
It's tough. As in, it's
is it long?
In a larger,
you have to be really persistent or determined.
In larger businesses, this is always going to be a difficulty. So always make an MVP. So I'm a big believer, especially within tech, in benevolent dictator for life approach. So there's one person with a very strict view, and that should be whoever is making the MVP.
Yeah.
So make the MVP to the best of your ability with the core functionality there.
Yeah.
and show it, and allow people to interact, allow people to use it, allow people to
Shoot it down.
exactly shoot it down, and just go through that thing. And you're going to see how easy it is to all of a sudden get buy-in. Because if everybody gets it, you don't have to even write a single PowerPoint presentation for the
Right.
interactive data sheets. I never made a PowerPoint presentation.
You haven't?
No.
I've seen one.
When we did the initial buy-in,
Yeah,
right?
no, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So because what happened is management was sharing it between themselves in the end, right? And
And
you got
good.
the buy, and you basically got the buy-in, and
Yeah.
then sure, go ahead, do it.
Yeah.
So I believe here seeing is believing,
Yeah.
and attempting to explain a vision is much harder than just simply showing the vision.
Right. Right.
And that's where skunkworks can come in handy.
So looking back 8-10 years of your career, what would be your main reflection on how digital has changed the way you do your job?
I would say the abundance of information. So understanding how to absorb information fast.
Yeah.
So I can see that, the jack of all trades
Mhm.
thing has now the potential to skyrocket to a whole new level.
Yeah. Or
And-
blow up in your face.
Yeah, well, and from what I have now focused a lot on is to get good at learning things quickly,
Right.
to understand things quickly. And I realized I'm not doing this because I necessarily myself want to, but because the technology is essentially allowing and forcing me to do so. And that's what has, for me, changed the most, is just attempting to absorb as much information as possible, because the information is simply out there now.
Just need to unlock it and
Why to search away at this point?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Stein, thank you very much
Thank you.
for your insights. I think some really good details on how to approach marketing in a very technical, maybe complex environment, sidestepping or the pitfalls of too much information. I kind of, there's so much for us to tap into.
Mhm.
So you have to be really picky, I guess, on what will be really beneficial for moving forward. So thank you very much. And hope to talk to you next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Stay connected to the Evolving Digital Podcast.